So welcome to another episode of the Altered Attitudes podcast. This episode is brought to you by East Coast Recovery, an online addiction treatment centre based in the east of England. And this episode is sponsored by Rehabs UK, the definitive place to go for rehabilitation treatment services and advice. And this is 2023 now.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. So I hope everybody had a good New Year and a good Christmas and had some time with your loved ones and your family and, you know, a few days off work at least. I was lucky enough to be able to book a little bit of holiday and went off to Berlin, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a lovely city.
Yeah, I recommend it to anyone. Quite grungy, but also in the same time quite clean.
If you ever remember any old war films around Berlin in the 40s, it's kind of still feels like that at night when it's a bit damp. And
yeah,
when I was there was still sort of bullet holes in the wall in the east.
Yeah, still there. Yeah, it does kind of feel like you've gone back in time a little bit.
Yeah, I like that.
But there's a lot of pride there. But from the people, you know, there's not a lot of litter. There's graffiti on every single wall, but in a way, there's not rubbish around.
They're very disciplined, clever people. Like that comedian said, he said that when the Germans go to war, they go to war with the world, and they nearly win every time. They are amazing people, and they're very industrious and make decent motors.
Yeah, a lot of BMWs driving about.
Yeah, very intellectual, very smart people.
Yeah, everyone I spoke to.
Very well educated.
Yeah, could tell that from being there just for a little while. So yes, it's a new year, and I think, you know, most New Years start with setting some kind of New Year's resolutions or some new sort of good intentions. Personally, I know that's something that I quite like to do at the start of the year. I guess you can set these at any time, but new calendar year just seems like a good time to do it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I know personally I like to set my goals. So I'll set like some larger goals and then sort of set smaller goals to reach towards it. And I know I'm guilty of it, and I think we all are, of setting these sorts of goals that we just can't achieve, or we just make them too difficult. And
like you mean when like people say I'm going to go on a diet, and then they go from no discipline, no exercise to this kind of starvation diet and set themselves a task at the gym of an athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they wonder why they fail.
Yeah, just setting yourself up for failure at every corner. So big advocate of, you know, you can have ambitious goals, but making sure you set, you know, little steps that get you there. That could be like a weekly thing that you do, or just a daily little activity perhaps.
Oh, you did that on that little video. That was good.
Yeah. So we put something out on social media about that. Yeah. So starting with your larger goals and then breaking it down into smaller ones and making sure that some of those goals were about helping others. Some of them were particularly easy to achieve, like really early in the year, because it might just be, I just want to go for a walk once a week to get my health up. Yeah. And if you go for a walk on that first day, you know you're doing all right.
I think walking is a good way of setting a distance, like a manageable distance, and trying to do it every day. Because if you lose the discipline, you're just not going to achieve your goals. I think discipline and continuity, they're two kind of non-negotiable. So I think you have to build that up. So I think walking, I find that just getting a distance that it's like no matter what, I've got to get to this point. And when you stop doing that, it's over then, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one of those things. I mean, it's like what you talk about in recovery with the 12 steps. It's those disciplines. It's those, not necessarily, they're not like mammoth tasks, but you just need to do them all the time. You know, the whole thing's a big task, but if you break it down into your little daily things, that's when you start to see.
Well, it's like the marathon. If the marathon's the goal, but you ain't going to just sort of run 26 miles or whatever a marathon is, you have to do it you might have to start walking. Yeah. You might have to then sort of jog a little bit, a few 100 yards, then half a mile, quarter to that. So by practicing something, you get better at it, but then it sort of qualifies you for the next stage. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, I think we all want to get a little bit too far up the ladder sometimes, and that actually does cause us to fail because you think, well, I can't do it. And it's like, well, you're probably going a bit fast. Like, I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of the time it is, you need to slow down a bit, or like you say, you know, you can eat the elephant, but you got to take smaller mouthfuls. And sometimes you're going to need a break because it make you feel a bit sick.
Yeah.
But if you keep going, it will get done in the end. And so I think that is a bit of an issue. It certainly has been with me. And again, a lot of people that I talk to, that this idea of time And I think having deadlines, again, can be good on one hand, but if you make them too extreme, then that also could set you up to fail.
Yeah, that's it.
So I think it's kind of trying to be realistic, but set the bar just high enough that you have to stretch a bit, and not so far that you're going to break in the stretch. And I think that's the real key to good development of any kind, is that where do you set the bar? Just set it this high. Once you stretch and reach it, then move it up a little bit more, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So, what comes in my head, because we sort of talk more about addiction, is I think that's where people go wrong with medications that are very, very addictive and very mind-altering. And I say that heroin alters your mind, but your Valiums and a lot of them pharmaceutical medications mutate it. It's so much harder to help people withdraw and come off them kind of medications. So I think the slower that you go with that, the more chance of you succeeding, because it takes time for your brain to build new pathways. And I think that's the difference. It's like your brain, certain chemicals make it harder for your brain to build pathways. So it makes it harder to bridge. And I think that's the same with in the physical as well. It just takes the time it takes you to develop to that point. And if you get to know yourself, then you've got more chance of success.
Yeah, I've heard people say it's 1% a day. If you can improve 1% a day, at the end of the year, you've improved 365% on what you were the previous year. Just 1% a day doesn't sound like much. Just a little bit more of this, a little bit more mindfulness, a little bit more. Maybe it's a little bit less calories, or maybe it's a little bit more walking, or maybe it's just a little bit more treating people right. Just 1% a day, and it adds up, right?
It's not like that. If you run 10 miles a day, you'll be 100 miles away in 10 days.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we're talking effort, I suppose, really, aren't we? As opposed to like distances. You can't lose one pound of fat every day, because you'll.
But that's how it gets you. I've got a bit myself, but it gets you like a couple of pound a year.
Yeah.
And if you're not burning it off, it creeps up on you.
We all notice it after Christmas as well, because it's like you've been indulging a little bit. There's so much food around and cheese. And
it's hard. It takes like a week to burn off one meal and 20 minutes to put it back on again. It's all round the wrong way, isn't it?
It's too easy. It's too easy. All right, so just before we move on, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about setting good intentions from the perspective of addiction, and like how that might work. Like, say you are in recovery and it's a new year, you probably got your kind of your themes and your goals anyway, but I appreciate that sort of setting good intentions is quite an important part of that process.
I think I'll have to think about that, because I didn't know you were going to say that, but I think it's like that. It's kind of like an everyday thing. In part of the AA program, there's a bit that we call On Awakening. It's around about page 86, 87 of the big book. And a big part of the 12-step program, and I think, you get the meetings that people go to, and you go to the meetings and you talk about your problems and your recovery and stuff like that. And then you get the 12-step program, which is a very different thing. It gives you disciplines and things that you kind of need to do, that you have to work at if you want to develop. So on Awakening, part of it is considering your day. The infantry at night is about looking back across your day to seeing, what went right, what went wrong. Capture the stuff mostly that went wrong, or the stuff that went right that you want to improve, and then put that into your infantry, and then look at ways of correcting it, improving it. And mostly, You know, when I started, to actually tell somebody I had a problem was almost an unbearable experience and something that I couldn't do. It's like even apologising for being wrong. It was like, not that I didn't want to do it, it just seemed impossible. And so as you start learning to do infantry in the evening and then speaking to people about it, you start realising that other people can give you advice or suggestions. You know, they might be good at something that you're not good at, and then you can try and apply that to your life. And then in the morning, it says when you wake up that you should spend a period of time in sort of meditation and clearing your mind and focusing. See, the meditation it talks about in the 12-step program isn't like the Buddhist clear your mind kind of meditation, which can be quite difficult. It's more about contemplative meditation. So you would consider the day ahead in your imagination, because your imagination is so important in life. It's kind of where a lot of anxiety comes from, fears come from, doubt comes from. Mm-hmm. You know, imagination really is the seat of creation in humanity, that we sort of have to imagine it in our mind, even whether you call it a plan, before we then start trying to create it. But so it says we consider our day ahead of us. So to give you sort of an example, say you start realising that every morning I get up, I go into the kitchen, I say to my wife, where's my breakfast? The kids are already eating theirs. She glares at me with that scowl like, make your own effing breakfast. And then I call her a bitch and the argument starts and the kids start crying. And well, that ain't the kind of a start to the day that you want, but it can be a pattern that occurs almost every day, or at least regularly. So if you were sort of working your program to that, you'd be thinking, you know, how do I correct this? And you might think, well, and again, a lot of people usually start with this when they talk to you. Yeah, but she this and she that and she this and she that. It's like, well, you know what? I'm not saying she's not at fault, but let's look at your part in it. What can you change about you? And then maybe we'll deal with her down the road a bit if that's necessary. So people say, well, when I wake up in the morning, I do feel a bit grumpy and it causes me anxiety walking into the kitchen and, you know, and it's like, well, all right, well then what could you do better? And they say, well, I probably shouldn't ask her for my breakfast. So, all right, that seems fair enough. What could you do? Well, I could maybe make myself some toast, maybe ask them if they want anything. I said, well, let's try that. But imagine it a bit first. Work it through in your mind a couple of times, because that really helps. Because funny enough, your brain doesn't actually know whether you're awake or asleep, you know, or it's actually not asleep. Sorry, doesn't know whether it's actually happening or you're just imagining it. Mm-hmm. So you could sit and imagine like sexy thoughts, and your body will start getting aroused. You can imagine being angry, and you'll start filling up with adrenaline. So when you sit and imagine and you keep running through the process, and I did an NLP course, and you know it taught you a lot of how you can re-anchor, they call it in NLP, that you just keep running through it a few times, but then they set the intention. It's like, now this is my intention. Now that's what the program is to me, or the benefits of the program, is that I set this intention to change. You know, like our prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Give me the courage to change the things I can, but I'm going to need a bit of wisdom to know the difference. So it's going to say, right, you're unhappy the way your day starts. You're unhappy with how grumpy that scenario is in the morning with your family. So now you're going to focus on trying something different. And so it says we consider the 24 hours ahead of us. And so you can then contemplate how I'm going to change, and then you run the scenario through your mind, that you imagine yourself going in the kitchen. Your wife might give you a morning glare, but you're going to ignore that because you've already set the intention of doing something different. And you'll say, morning, how's everybody this morning? Well, straight away, they're all going to go, what's wrong with him?
He's a bit happy.
There's something wrong with him. Then you're going to say, I'm going to make some toast. Does anyone like some toast? And they're all going to go, man, there's something really mad going on. And when people say you can't change other people, it's not really true. Because they're all going to start changing.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to go, what's different here? The pattern's changing. And probably more favourable. But you know, that might just be the first step. There might be issues in that dynamic that might trigger them off. She might, what's wrong with you? And then she may fire something back and you might get caught in that and then you might start the argument again. But it's like, well, that's okay. You made a step. You moved a bit forward. Let's build on it. Let's imagine now what you can do next. And so it's always good to have set intentions, because most people, when they've got issues and patterns, they're responding. They're just responding. They're not thinking. Mm-hmm. And so in that part of the program on the Unawakenings, it talks about we learn to pause. Mm. That when something triggers us, or we're unhappy, or we're feeling angry, we pause. And it says we say a prayer, or, you know, we ask that we stop being angry. Yeah. But it creates a pause.
I think that's a basic thing that you kind of get taught at a young age, to take a break and take 5 minutes. Or to
count
take
to
a
10.
breath.
Count to 10. It's brilliant.
But we just forget to do it. We just don't do it, do we? Because you don't think, oh, what's the point? What's that going to do? And you get caught in the moment. I think it does take great willpower to do that.
No,
it's wisdom,
and it's not a choice. It's not a choice. It's just a response. Yeah. And the choice is what we're trying to put back into that person's mind, to say, look, your mind's got a mind of his own. You're supposed to be the chairman of it. You've not even got a choice, because they're like, I don't even want to do that. It just, I see red, or the red mist drops, or whatever it is. Well, that's saying you've got no choice. Mm-hmm. And you don't have, but you do have the ability to develop the choice. But you're going to need some responsibility to take in control of your thinking, and you're going to have to start learning to develop it. And again, it's good to set them intentions. It is good to do the visualizations. They're very powerful. If you're listening, try it. If you've got an issue, just try to do the visualizations. Make the commitment to try and respond differently. You may fail lots of times, but you keep going, and eventually, because what's actually in your brain is you're building a new pathway. When you're building a new pathway, two things happen. The old pathway, if you imagine it as like a grass field, if you keep walking over it one direction, but you're going where you don't want to be, you're going to put a path in it. Now, I think most people, if you had a field and then put a path in it, I should think most people would walk to the path and then cross the field. Mm-hmm. Now, they're conditioned to do that. But then if somebody would come along and go, where you want to go? And they go, look, I go over that path, but I go to Great Yarmouth. I don't want to go to Great Yarmouth. I want to go to Lowestoft. And he's like, well, you need to go that way. They're like, but there's no path. He's like, yeah, I know, you're going to have to create one. Now, as you keep walking in the right path, even though you naturally want to go on the wrong path, you start creating a new pathway very slowly. Now, as you start building a new pathway, the old one, because you're not walking on it anymore, it starts to grow over. And they thought this was impossible not so long ago. They thought that you really couldn't sort of change your mind, that you're kind of hardwired, but you've got neuroplasticity. So if you create the right environment, which is in between your ears, then you can change your mind as much as you want. Mm-hmm. But if you don't make the effort to do that, then you're just going to respond all the time, and you're not really got a choice. You're just going to do what you've been conditioned to do. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of, when you reach a certain level of consciousness, which I think is a good thing about the spirituality side of our program, it's sort of asking you to reach a certain level of consciousness. And I think that's the important thing, because you start becoming conscious. It's like, it's nice when you're sponsoring people. They've give up the drink, they've give up the drugs, and they're on the phone to you because they've got life problems going on now, which is the greater part of the program. And then they'd like start saying, mate, I'm really unhappy. I get up in the morning, I always end up arguing with my wife, upsetting the kids. And it's like, well, let's have a look at that. Let's see if we can make some changes. When I say we, I mean you. And those that want to do that and work on it, they start doing the development. And that's kind of what makes the program so complex, because humans are complex, and there's quite a few, probably 100,000 or more elements to all of our lives. The way that we think. People can phone up and say, look, I don't really harm anyone, but my thinking is really distressing me. I keep having these terrible thoughts. Or I feel somebody today who spoke to me and I just feel angry and I'm just hating myself. I feel angry towards everybody. And so, that might not always leak out, but that can cause depression and all kinds of mental illness and emotional problems. And often people, if you went to the doctor and said that, he's probably going to give you medication that's all then going to start altering your mind in another way. And so, the program is very complex because people are, but it is about learning to get a bit of control over that bit of real estate between our ears and see, look, what is it I'm thinking? And that's where it's in, we've got to look at our responses, and then we've got to improve our responsibility or our ability to respond. Because I want to respond better to my wife. I want to respond better to my children. I want to respond better to work opportunities. And, a lot of people have anxieties. But, even them, I've seen just so much change, incredible change in people's lives. It's just even like talking now. It reminds me of this one guy he phoned up. He said, and it's often this, he said, my wife, she's so angry. She won't do anything for me. We argue all the time. And so, doing an inventory to say, well, let's look at what the issue is. What is wrong with her? I don't know. And he's like, well, she's probably been shouting it at you for the last 10 years, so you should know, probably not listening. See, a lot of people do hear, but they don't listen. They don't understand. So often in them situations, I say, well, look, go and ask your wife, if she don't mind, to make a list of what she thinks wrong with you.
That's a hard thing to do, isn't it?
But when you're down that low, you do anything.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, it's kind of like, it's a good practice. It's a good practice for anyone to stop every now and then and ask your partner. Because again, that's the feedback that you should be getting in your life. Look, any business knows you want the feedback from your customers to improve your business. You don't want unhappy customers. And if your wife's screaming, shouting at her, she's an unhappy customer. You're not giving her comments or allowing her to do a review. Yeah. And again, most people are like, yeah, but she this, she that, she this, she that. And then she's like, he this, he that, he this. And he's like, well, look, I'm sure both of you are wrong to a degree, but take responsibility for your part in it. Mm-hmm. But again, having the benefit of doing this over a lot of years and seeing the results of this practice, that people usually come back, and let's say pretty much there's, roughly around 10 things on the list, say. And so you sit down with a person, because this is infantry, and you say, right, what on that list that she's saying is unreasonable? It's usually the same sort of stuff. He don't help with the kids. He don't help with the house. He don't let me have enough money. He treats me like this. He don't take me out. He don't cut the grass. Don't take the bins out. Whatever it is, it's like, so you're like, well, what on that list is unreasonable? And they're like, well, none of it really. Well, maybe them two things. It's usually like a couple of things. They're like, well, that's unreasonable. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I agree with you. That's probably her stuff. But the program's about you. So for the next period of time, your program, apart from doing your morning meditation and setting intentions in your nighttime infantry and going to your meetings, and getting a sponsor and taking on a service position and trying to help other people. Part of your program now is that you're going to practice doing some of that stuff. And honestly, without fail, in a short period of time, they're like, mate, it's like another world. It's like a miracle. And then you're like, well, what about them 2 other things? They're like, what 2 other things? Because a lot of it was being caused by the conflict. And that's often that's the problem with humanity. Look, alcoholics and addicts, they're no different from anyone else. They're just usually more extreme examples of everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so when they make them changes, and again, that's an ongoing thing. The program is an ongoing, just like a good business. Just keep getting the data, analysing it, and making corrective measures. How can it fail? I mean, really, how can you fail? I mean, look, some point, people, they get to a point, it's like, mate, she's a nightmare, he's a nightmare. And it's like, well, then they've got problems. Mm-hmm. So, now we're going to have to have a strategy. How are you going to deal with them problems? Some people don't want to change. Some people, it's very hard for them. They've got a lot of damage. And life's not black and white, which has been a hard thing for me to accept. There's grey areas. It's not I think it is a perfect science. I just don't think we're perfect. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think we have to be. Again, in the STEP program, it talks about, we're not saints. The point is we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. But that's not an excuse to not make any effort. It's, we do have to, make some effort. And if you're going to change, you're going to have to create an environment. And it starts with in between your ears. To allow that to happen. But literally, I've been doing this for 30 years and pretty much everyone I know that practices it, they go through their ups, they go through their downs, but they usually develop through it all. Mm-hmm. None of us want difficult times in our life, but, you can't deny that if you took all the difficult times out of my life, I probably would still be 11-year-old, emotionally and mentally.
They help us grow, don't they?
They do, times. You can't deny it.
The adversity, and that's kind of that 1% a day again. You kind of just, you're not going to solve all these problems overnight. No. You've just got to do a little bit. You might fail a few times, but if you've got your goals, if you've got your intentions, you know where you're heading. At least you can start walking that path. Yeah. We recorded a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was kind of a response to the BBC documentary Inside Recovery, which was a really interesting one. And Leslie had some points about that, particularly in regards to what they were saying. The particular phrase, which was, it doesn't work for everybody. Mm-hmm. And you had some thoughts on that, which I understand were, from some points of view, perhaps controversial, but very important. And a lot, it came from a place of love and a lot of truth as well. And we want to get into that a little bit, because we had quite a few comments on LinkedIn. A lot of them really positive, enjoying it, but some that kind of didn't quite understand. We just wanted to kind of talk through those a little bit and maybe get your thoughts and opinions on those, and have a chance for a little bit of
I haven't read any of them, and I've not heard them, so this is coming in cold. So
so we'll see how we go.
It's controversial for me too.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So anyway, so I won't go into who these people are exactly, but I've got just written down their
This
first
was
name.
from LinkedIn, was it?
These were from LinkedIn, yeah. So we got one from Steve saying, I'm not a fan of this, to be honest. It's full of bias. We should be promoting multiple pathways of recovery. Imagine working with someone and telling them that it works for everybody and it's not working because you don't want it. Should we not be providing the space for individuals to explore why it might not be working, rather than projecting our bias and telling them? So for me, that kind of says that he's seeing it as such that you're not allowing other pathways to recovery, which isn't true.
I think we said that. I don't believe that. I believe that we just have a way that works, just promoting our way. Mm-hmm. That's all. I do think that, there is other ways. I don't necessarily know what they are because I don't practice them. Mm-hmm. I practice this way, and so I'm just sort of flying the flag for this treatment method that I think doesn't always get a fair crack at the whip. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about it because other people don't understand it. But I can't really comment on any other way, because if they give me a name of another way, I know about smart recovery and things like that, but I've never been that involved in it. But if somebody said they were going to smart recovery, I wouldn't. And if it's working for them, then. But again, I think they're almost a bit contradictory what he's saying there. You might have to read that last bit again, but it would only be cruel telling somebody that could possibly be the fact that they don't want to do it's not working for him if it's not the truth. My point is if it is the truth that it's not working so well because they don't want to do it, then I don't see what's cruel about that. But I think at the end there he might have balanced it out by saying maybe we should help them understand that, maybe he seems to be thinking that I'm coming from a place of bias, but it sounds that he is actually. That if somebody does have biased or bad information or misunderstanding, then that should be explored. That I totally agree. That's what I'm trying to do by even making that video in the first place, of saying whenever I try and fly the flag for what I believe, you obviously get a lot of other people that have different beliefs. So it's just a conversation. But no, I don't think that. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I do believe that if it doesn't work for you, then it could. You may be the problem here, and that does need to be explored. I'm not saying you have to do it, but if you fail an exam because you haven't studied for it, then what's wrong in telling you that? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I suppose it goes back to it's all the wording, and that particular wording of the sentence. It doesn't work for everybody.
That's not my sentence. That's the sentence I'm challenging.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, and this is the whole point of that segment, right? Was about challenging that particular sentence and the way that it's worded, because words are powerful.
But it's funny how people do believe that I'm saying our way's the only way. That's what they hear, but that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what that comment.
I'm just saying this way works, and that often people that don't want to do it, it doesn't work for them.
And
but then telling them it doesn't work for them. I don't think that's the truth. I think it will work for you if you apply yourself to it, because I can't see how it can't. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine. And if you find a way that works better for you, that's great too.
Yeah, and I think that goes on to... So another comment we got here was... It's a bit short, I won't read the whole thing though, but essentially it's just saying that, people are different and relate to different things. I think that, I
get it.
That's fair.
But that means you don't want to do it. Not it doesn't work for you. Which is fine.
Okay, so I just want to go into this next one here. This one's a little bit longer, and there's a couple of points in there that I think are interesting and worth just discussing a little bit. So again, he says he's basically saying that. Well, I don't think this is Mark from LinkedIn. I don't think anyone would genuinely argue against the assertion that a 12-step approach can and often does work. Fair enough. Not that it, or indeed any recovery method...
I think that's not true, because we just discovered people will do that,
Well, yeah, exactly. Okay, so nor that, or indeed any recovery method can only work if the person commits to making it work. So again, right, it works if you work
that I
it.
don't agree with, that every recovery method works. I'd have to know what one you're talking about, because I think there's certain elements that need to be part of that process for it to work. For example, is like, most people that I've worked with, including myself, suffer from resentment, and resentment is really bad for your mental health, but a lot of people have it. And so if you're resentful, the principle that would free you from that would be forgiveness. Now, if you're angry at someone, you'd have to forgive them if you want to be free from that emotional turmoil. Now, I don't know any other way of doing that. So if your recovery program doesn't involve some kind of forgiveness, now, I'm not saying it has to be 12-step forgiveness, Christian forgiveness, Muslim forgiveness, just Granny Smith forgiveness. It doesn't matter where the forgiveness that you're learning in, but if it doesn't include that, it probably won't work to relieve you of the mental anxieties and stress that resentment causes, which if you don't deal with that will probably lead you back to relapse. So I think it's sort of dangerous to say that all other methods work. Now again, there's probably somebody, it works for somebody, and I accept that. But if you can get relief for resentments by not forgiving, then you've probably not got that problem to begin with. And then I would question whether you're the kind of alcoholic and addict that I'm actually talking about. Because a lot of people drink and take drugs, but I wouldn't say they're alcoholic and addict. So when they say, well, I recovered, I'd probably say, well, you might not be the kind that I'm actually talking about and talking to. Because the truth is, when I do these podcasts, I do these talks, I'm only talking to a portion of people that have this particular problem, that unfortunately get lost into the mainstream by giving programs that don't have the necessary principles that they need to practice to recover. And they're usually the most difficult clients because they're not getting very good treatment. But they're getting a lot of treatment. I mean, look, we're in our 9th year of rises in death. Now, that might not mean a lot to a lot of people that are not involved in addiction treatment, but that's shocking to me because I'm involved in addiction treatment. We have a way that works. There's people dying, more and more every year for the last 9 years, which means, I don't know how they got that for 9 years. That's probably, there's more people dying this year than have ever died before in history. Now, we've got more treatment in our country than we've ever had. Honestly, in this year, there's more drug and alcohol agencies in every town, every city. Now, they might say we're underfunded. It's like, well, it still don't matter. There's more opportunities for recovery than ever before. There's more harm minimalisation than ever before. But yet we're getting the highest death rates. Now, that would tell me that either people aren't accepting the treatment or it's just not good treatment. So not all treatment works. Look, I've watched different government rollouts every 4 years for the last 20 odd years. They failed. The treatments they were offering people failed based on outcomes. So you can't tell me every treatment works. Now, I'm sure even though they failed, somebody probably did all right. It ain't black and white. It's like, I wouldn't say that just doing AA is going to work for you. It's like most things, you need a healthy diet of lots of different things, whatever your needs are. It's doing good assessments and helping people meet the needs and deal with their issues is important. So again, I'm kind of sceptical that when people sort of want to say that, well, every treatment is equal. It's just not true. And every treatment doesn't work for everybody.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought too much on that, but that's a really good point.
And I'm not saying that them treatments don't work for somebody, the same as what they're trying to say about the 12 step. All I'm saying is that this probably will work for everybody that gives it a fair crack at the whip, if they can or will.
So something I thought that was interesting that this Mark chap goes on to say a little bit later on in this comment, it was quite long, so I'll just go through the kind of bits that I think are worth us discussing. But he says something about the 12-step program focusing on creating coping mechanisms rather than seeking out the root cause of hurt, trauma, behaviour, which I kind of think is a bit of a misunderstanding there. And says that in many ways it promotes replacing one coping method, which is the addiction, by committing to another lifelong behavioural coping method.
Well, yeah. I think, see, again, you have to take it in like two parts. Initially, we say the newcomer's the most important person in the room. Well, then people, I think the program that says it's a substitute. That it's a substitute from living in that lifestyle to going into a very different lifestyle. That's kind of what it offers, the fellowship, is to say, look, you're going to need this massive amount of support. So initially, when people come in, that is like that. It is sort of trying to build a bit of a protective bubble. But as you develop the program and develop your own mind and your own coping strategies and development tools in your own mind, like we talked about in the beginning of this podcast, then that initial element is not so important. You start becoming a little bit, it's kind of like being in bondage and then being set free, but having to develop new, we call it the bridge to normal living. That bridge is the development phase of where you redevelop your neural pathways, where you evolve your capacity to deal with life's issues and problems. That takes some time. So, people that you meet that first come in are not the same people that you meet in 5-10 years down the road if they've been developing. And really, the principles involved in the program, they're just natural, human, universal principles. That's why I'm confident they don't fail, because they're principles. They're just human principles. It might have the name of AA or Christianity or Anthony Robbins development. Whoever you're listening to, it's all the same principles. And that's what I'm saying. If them programs contain these principles of human mental development, then you will develop. But that becomes you. I've been in AA over 30 years, but I'm not like I live my life. I'm Lester, and I do what I want, and I'm responsible for me and my development. And I depend on AA very little for the last 20 years. If I go, it's generally to support other people, not for me. I have my own personal program that I've developed through my faith, through NLP, through, lots of different avenues. It's the thing, but, the foundation of that is AA. I don't think I could have completely, AA didn't completely work for me. It was other things that I had to go and do, but it was an incredible foundation. And a lot of that was based on the fellowship that it gave me, that support. And it's true, at the beginning, you become like you're joining a cult. You become a bit fanatical about it, but that's the way the brain works in Alcoholics and Addicts. It's sort of, you change. When you work with people, they drive you nuts. But as the years go by, you can see their mental health improving because they're the program that they're using is helping them move to that place of independence. So it's, the haters always say, well, it keeps telling everyone they're powerless. It's like, that's not true. It says we were powerless. Now the people that are damaged and don't understand the program, they keep saying they're powerless. And people in AA say it. They say, I'm powerless. It's like, I'm not powerless. I've been empowered. It says, if you read the first step, it says we were powerless. Now, powerlessness was our dilemma. We needed power. Where was to find that power? So I'm not powerless because I've worked the program. In actual fact, I have a lot of power. I have the power to transfer my recovery to other people if they're willing to listen. So it's not about powerlessness, it's about power. But again, the haters like to say, well, it helps you be powerless. They keep thinking they're powerless. And again, it is kind of controversial, but it's not saying that at all. It's another misconception that's damaging, that a lot of people believe and follow, unfortunately. Because they are powerless when they think like that.
Yeah, a couple of other points that he kind of mentions, I think probably should go over briefly. Buying into a faith or belief system that might not align with an individual's personal ethos, but as we know, the book was written in the 30s in a very Christian world.
Middle class Christian American world, yeah.
But the human principles of it can be, you could reword it in any way, and you could, believe in any kind of belief system.
Well, I think it's the universal principles of things like, that's the thing. Each step is kind of like, contains a lot of sort of principles like patience, tolerance, forgiveness, kindness, caring, that's kind of what you're learning. And they are principles that are aligned with most faiths of the world, or not faiths at all, because they're just principles. It's, you know, it's kind of like, I kind of think that, you know, if you're a diabetic and you need insulin, you know, and Boots dispense the insulin, it's, what's it got to do with Boots? It's the insulin I want. Not, I don't have to want to be like a follower of Boots or any other chemist. It's about getting the insulin, and so it's like these are universal principles that you're learning. There's just the correct principles involved in the 12-step program that you're going to need to alter your attitude, like what we call that podcast, to change your mind. It just teaches you, mate, you need to be more caring. You need to stop worrying so much. You need to stop being so aggressive. You need to be more forgiving. You need to be more patient in that area. You need to be more tolerant. Because again, all these words and these principles, they give you better emotions. It makes you feel better when you learn this stuff. But people in addiction, most of them they just don't have that understanding. So it encourages them. It gives them a vehicle to develop. So again, if you're a person of faith, that's fine. If you're not a person of faith, it don't matter. You're still practicing the same principles. Like I say, if you're resentful, you're going to have to learn forgiveness and patience and tolerance, because it's going to keep causing you to be resentful. And, you know, when I'm resentful, it really makes me feel ill, and it starts to darken me down, and I become not a nice person. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, having a program and a faith that tells me that that's not a good way to be, and then shows me a better way to be, then I want to practice that. So, you know, it says quite clearly that you can choose whatever conception of higher power you want. See, it's a power greater than self is the important part of that. Now, because it says self, your ego, and again, it's not everyone understands what that is, but it's you're too self-conscious, you're too self-pitying, you're too self-centered. You know, it's this, and the fact that you're so selfish, and it's not that way, it's saying that in a judgment way. It's saying that you're so consumed in yourself that that's what's causing you to suffer so much, because it doesn't go well in relationships. It doesn't go well in any area, really. So it's saying that so you're listening to yourself. You're trying to satisfy yourself continually. And you have no control over that. You keep listening to yourself and doing what yourself says. So it's saying you need a power greater than yourself. You need something that you're going to listen to regardless of what you're saying. Now, again, people are like, well, that's like mind control, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah, again, it kind of is at the beginning, but it's coming from that place that this person's got a sick and twisted mind. They're not in their right mind. They're going to need guidance, and I can't give you guidance unless you're willing to trust me and follow what I'm saying. But I don't want you to follow me around for the rest of your life. I just want to give you some guidance and direction until your brain recovers the capacity to make better decisions for yourself that you're happy with. So it's, you know, people go, oh, well, you're taking away their freedom. It's like, they haven't got any freedom. They're under the influence of a mind-altering substance. They don't choose to live like that. That's not a normal choice. That's a drug-soaked brain, mentally ill person choice. It's obvious to see. So clearing their mind from the chemical that's making it difficult for them to make better choices for themselves and giving them some direction. You know, it's like the old sort of songs, isn't it? Like, you know, lean on me when you're not strong and I'll help you carry on. But hopefully when you recover, we want you walking yourself. So, you know, it's a kindness at the beginning to say, just look, come along, do what we're telling you, and your brain will get better, and you'll get your independence, you'll get your power back, you'll get your choice back. Mm-hmm. And then you can choose to live your life the way, look, I've been doing it for 30 years, mate. No one tells me what to do, but I seek a lot of advice. I don't generally make decisions that are important without good counsel, because I know that's a big mistake, because I don't know everything. I know it sounds like I think I do, but I know that I don't. So I generally keep myself accountable, especially in areas where I've got emotional turbulence or disturbance, because I generally will make decisions based on anger or resentment or lust or fear or greed, and I don't want to live my life that way. There's higher principles that I subscribe to that are in most religions and most development programs, but not all. So when I look at a lot of them programs that the government rolled out over the years, I could see there's no recovery in this program. That you're really sticking plasters on people's problems, and they're going to fail, and they have. And now we're at the next level of social experimentation because they haven't solved the problem. There's more people dying now than ever before, when there's more treatment than ever before. Tell me why that is.
All right, so another comment, which I think is a really great one. I think this will probably be the last one because we're starting to run low on time today. But Magdalena says, there's so many different meetings of AA, NA, CA, GA, as well as Smart Recovery, that it's good to encourage people to try a few different meetings so they can find their quote-unquote tribe. Mutual aid and peer support can be such an important part of recovery journeys, and it's great that there are options. Mutual aid and peer support alongside formal treatment can be a great combination, giving top-ups through the week, at evenings, over the weekends, in between appointments. Recovery communities are invaluable.
I agree, but I don't think that, on the whole, if you've got mental health problems, that meetings alone are going to help you. Mm-hmm. I think that's why a lot of people do relapse, because they're not actually dealing with the underlying causes of the problem. So I think meetings are great, but I think if you haven't got a program that's, or whatever people want to call it, some way of processing what's happening to you in the past problems and how you're going to deal with your life today and moving forward. And so I think it's great to go to meetings and mutual aid groups, but you really do need to learn a process of how to process what's going on for you. Mm-hmm. And, again, that's kind of what the 12-step program offers, is a structured way of processing on a daily basis that develops as you go on, and you get better at it. It actually says this, again, it's sort of going back to the last questions. It said if you practice this daily, it becomes a working part of your mind. I've got a very good problem-solving mind now. So again, I don't need to phone people up as much anymore because I've developed, and in fact, people phone me more now because they want to ask my point of view. And then I listen to what their problems are, which is I help them take an inventory, which again, you do it in business. It's not just, it's in every area of life. It's just natural. It's just natural to develop a brain that can process what's happening to you and then strategize and come up with, make good decisions that bring you the outcomes that you're hopefully looking for. And so, it's a working part of my mind now because I've been practicing it for years. So, it's one of the things I guess get on people's nerves about me is I like solving problems because it's what I've learned to do, and I've learned I get a lot of benefit from that. My whole life is about solving problems. It's what life is a lot of the time, and like we said, it helps you grow. Mm-hmm. So the more problems I solved, I've got quite a fantastic, big, complex life that I'm managing to sort of I can't think of what the word is. I think it was after Christmas. I think I've stopped eating sugar, so my mind's a little bit foggy. But I can manage my life, and I think that's the important bit, is that I can manage quite a large life and quite a large complex problems where I couldn't before I learnt this method. Mm-hmm. And again, that's our first step. It's saying, look, you're powerless before you've practiced this program, and the evidence of that is your life's unmanageable. Mm-hmm. So teaching people to manage isn't kind of like the overall goal. At the beginning, you'd help them manage, but you'd want to teach them to find that power that empowers them to start developing the capacity to manage their own life. Yeah. And a lot of people don't manage their own life, even in addiction treatment. They're, if you took the people out that are supporting them, again, we all need support, but, a lot of people just cannot manage. even though they're not drinking or taking drugs, they just can't manage to run a life that contains all the things they want to do in it, because their brains have not developed the capacity to do that. So I think that's the important bit. Is like, that's true. There is many good meetings and mutual aid groups, and they're great to go, they're great to get involved in, but really you need to understand, how do I get into this development program, or a development program, because that's going to be the winner for you in the long run. You don't want to stay, the truth is, from my experience, and again, remember, I've worked with a lot of people in addiction in the rehab for a lot of years. If people don't have that, they kind of don't develop. So even though they might not have had a drink or a drug in 20 years, they're still living very much like a drug addict or alcoholic, and especially emotionally, mentally, and in their relationships. And they phone me up, people 20 years in recovery, and they're like, mate, I'm really struggling. And it's always the same thing. It's like, mate, you've not been developing. So you're still suffering the same problems, but you were under the illusion that stopping drinking or taking drugs was going to fix all your problems. It doesn't. You're mostly underdeveloped in areas that are important for you to develop, or you're just not going to get the emotional relief that you're looking for. So I'm a bang on about program, but because I think it's important to have a process. It's about processing, developing.
Yeah, and it's not just the recovery is the beginning, the kind of getting clean, so to speak.
If you ain't changing, evolution's punishing you.
Yeah, you got to keep evolving. You got to develop the 97%. Development goes on forever, right?
It's forever, so that's all it is. So it's not. I'm not sworn up to any cult or AA or anything like that. I feel very much I'm autonomous. I feel like I'm a free man who makes my own decisions based on information that I've gathered from different sources.
Yeah, that's how it should be. So anybody listening to this podcast, make sure you go and listen to some more podcasts and get your information from lots of different places and make your own decisions in this life. And develop, set those New Year's resolutions and keep pushing forwards a little bit at a time. Yeah,
well, that's the only reason for this. Obviously you want to do a bit of marketing, but there's nothing better than people that, you help them understand something. Because again, we've learnt a lot in 30 odd years of doing this. And some of it, I realise that when you tell people, I see their lives change for the better. So again, it is important information. Now, not everyone wants to hear it. I get that a lot. People are like, 10 years ago, you were telling me this, you were telling me that. But now I realise what you were saying. Thank you very much. Because a lot of the time it is kind of like that, and you don't know what it's like. When you're a child, you kind of hate your parents, and then you become a parent yourself and you realise how difficult it was for them. So I think, it's certainly that way for me, that you kind of get about 30 and then you sort of phone your parents up and go, you know what, I'm really sorry, you were right, but I didn't understand then. And I think that's, that's kind of, I'd be considered an old timer in AA now. I started when I was 25, but it's kind of my job to keep blurting this stuff out, and the kids rebelling at you and getting angry at you and all the rest of it. But not saying everything that I'm saying is like right, but it does help a lot of people. So we just keep saying it, and hopefully it helps. And it's still got stuff to learn. I'm happy to listen to other people's points of view. Not too happy listening to the trolls or the angry ranters, because I don't even like listening to myself when I'm like that.
Yeah. Well, you always get the comments, and it's heat of the moment as well. And I think a lot of, they're complex topics. You can't always just cast an opinion straight away, right? Sometimes.
No, and they're hard to reply to. That's why I don't like reading them. Yeah. I think this is a good way of doing it, because it just takes a lot of writing and a lot of back and forth. I'm generally better talking than I am writing. So I probably wouldn't respond to a comment. I don't even read them. So I'm glad that you did that. That was, I know there's a lot more to do there, but I think I'd rather have the conversation face to face than in writing, because it's too much to say.
Yeah.
To get to hopefully a comfortable place that we can agree, whether it's to disagree. If we disagree, that's fine, but it's nice that everybody's been heard, and that I've had my point of view, you've had your point of view, and if we can't find a place of complete synergy and agreement, then at least we can agree to disagree. Because I found a lot of time, you know, that people have been against me over the years of what I'm saying, even in AA. You know, their heart is trying to help the new person, and that's the same for me. And that's one thing that we kind of agree on, that we're both trying to help the new bloke or the vulnerable person. But it's a minefield, life, isn't it? It's like, you know, we've all got different views, different ideas, and, you know, you've got to have your voice.
All right. Well, I think that's another episode of the Old Attitudes podcast wrapped up. And this is brought to you by East Coast Recovery and Rehabs UK. So we do have support available. So as always, in the show notes, there will be contact information, and, you know, you can get in touch with us there. Give us a call, drop us an email. We've got contacts with rehabs all around the country. And we'll put some links to 12-step groups as well, like AA and NA and those sorts of things.
Sure. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone. And really consider working on that little bit of real estate between your ears called your brain. That's where most of your problems are. And you can do something about it if you want.